Hi there, it's John here from itsmorethanjustgaming.com, and welcome. Today I'm joined by Andrew Gronosky, who is going to be releasing on Kickstarter next month a role-playing game called Magonomia. Andrew, say hello to the viewers.
Hello, viewers. It's a pleasure to be here. This is my first interview.
Excellent.
In the gaming industry.
I'm sure that's a story that we can talk about off camera later, perhaps. Okay, so Magonomia. Could you tell us a little bit about Magonomia and perhaps start by explaining what it means?
Oh, sure. Magonomia is a portmanteau of Greek words meaning magic, that's magia, and nomia is laws or principles. So it's the laws of magic. That's the meaning of it. And it's a game of Renaissance wizardry. I've always had a passion for wizards. I have a wizard hat now. I'm very proud of it. And wizards are cool. It's fun to roleplay a wizard. And I've been interested in historically themed magic, historical fantasy for some time. I do have a history with Ars Magica, which is a great game, and you should try it. And I wanted something that would be closer to, well, I asked myself what would happen if we had magic in a game that's closer to what historical people believed in Europe. And it turns out it's quite playable. It makes for a good game. Renaissance magic, and we chose a Renaissance period because that's really the high watermark of magic as an intellectual pursuit, and it's also a time after the printing press when there are lots of sources available, so the history feels richer.
Okay. I was going to ask why you'd chosen Elizabethan England, but you've already answered that. So,
well, that's for anyone, part of the story. There's more. The
Tell me more.
Period is fun. It's great. There are a lot of people who are enthusiastic about the Tudors and history. It's a great time for adventure because there are some conflicts that are built in. We have to be a little delicate about the religious dimension of the conflict, but there were intrigues against the Queen. The famous plotting of Mary, Queen of Scots. Elizabeth had an intelligence agency that developed secret codes and some processes that foreshadowed the intelligence cloak and dagger work of today. There was the Spanish Armada. There were the voyages of discovery. It's a time of adventure and swashbuckling.
Awesome. For a lay person who hasn't studied history, where might they go to actually get a good representation of this in your view?
It depends on what you're really looking for. It's Magonomia is a historical fantasy game. I would say go with Shakespeare plays or films of Shakespeare plays to get a sense of the time and the costumes and the attire. I definitely recommend the Helen Mirren version of The Tempest, which gives you a feel for Renaissance magic. And I know that's not quite what you asked. As to history books, I'm fond of a book called The Time Traveler's Guide to Elizabethan England because it talks about the things that gamers want to know about. If I go to a town, what do I see? If I get in trouble with the law, what happens? So that's a really good book, and it was one of my early sources that helped me settle on this period.
Excellent. Okay, so you've spoken obviously in this video just now, and with myself over email over the last couple of weeks, and you've demonstrated a sizable knowledge or authority on the subject. Where did it come from? Was it reading things like The Time Traveler's Guide or reading Shakespeare, or where did it come from?
Well, for history, it came through gaming. I mentioned Ars Magica earlier, and I don't want to harp on Ars Magica, but it was my hobby for a long time. And that's what really turned me on to European history. Ars Magica is set earlier in the medieval period. And I just started reading medieval history when I was in college. And it was after we had the idea for Magonomia that I started getting into the Elizabethan period. Another thing that's nice about the Renaissance is that there is a lot more film and documentary television. The BBC is a great resource for finding out about Queen Elizabeth's intelligence agencies or some of the mad things that Henry VIII did.
I also quite like the movie Elizabeth. I like Geoffrey Rush's portrayal of Sir Francis Walsingham, her head of intelligence, but that's just a personal preference of mine. For other reasons, actually, I like to base some of my role-playing villains on his type of character because he's very good as a villain / anti-hero. But that's a little digression. So, yes, I've veered away a little bit from the game just to get a little bit of context there, and I'm actually pleased to actually hear that role playing has led you to history and do other studies. So there you heard it here, folks. Role playing helps education. It costs. You went and studied Renaissance Europe. I actually about. Just under 2 years ago, started studying Dark Ages Europe for role-playing purposes. Mm-hmm. But there you go. Okay, so let's go back to the game. Who do you think the game itself is going to appeal to in terms of general people and experienced gamers as well? What sort of groups do you think will think that they'll look at it, they'll pick it up and think, yes, this is for me?
I'm aiming this largely at people who may have dabbled in gaming in earlier life and would consider coming back if sufficiently inspired. There are great games on the market today. The leading games, I feel, are more numbers heavy and more there's the gamist, narrativist, and simulationist triad of design, and they lean toward the gamist and simulation corners. So they're designed for people who want to dig into rules. I'm talking about leading games, Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm looking for a game to make a game that's going to appeal to people who want more story and less mechanics, less barrier to entry, less cognitive load, as that's actually a technical term that so who might that appeal to are well, really people like myself, working professionals who maybe don't have a committed group of gamers and are looking for more casual gamers. It's a game that younger gamers can maybe get their parents to play. And because it's got historical roots, I think it's something that parents who are gamers can introduce their kids to try to help them get connected to history and to literature. This can be a gateway to Shakespeare if you're into Shakespeare.
Yep, fair enough. Having done here's a bizarre thing to admit. I have an English literature degree, and I didn't study Shakespeare in my entire degree. No, or at least not his plays.
That's great. And I will say, I used to go to Renaissance fairs regularly. I know there's a Renaissance enthusiast crowd, and they overlap with gamers some, not entirely, but some. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that we can draw in some more history and drama enthusiasts into the hobby.
Excellent.
But for experienced gamers, people who want to dig into magic, people who've been captivated by magic and inspired by magic, because Magonomia is based on real books that people thought worked of magic. Now, it's based loosely. There are people who know a lot more about the occult than I do, but I found that sticking closely to the historical sources actually makes the magic system more playable, more consistent, more believable, and less world-breaking.
Okay. You spoke about the gaming triangle earlier on, and this, from reading the starter rules, which are available on Drive-Thru RPG, and I will link them in the description of this video and on the article that accompanies this video. They're available there just now if you want to have a look at them. I'm getting the distinct impression that this is more of a narrative-based game using the fate system. Would that be a fair statement?
I would say yes.
Okay. I have to admit, I hadn't encountered the fate system before. I've encountered something that does similar things to it before, but for the folks that haven't, could you give an idea of what it is and what its advantages are?
Fate took me a while to warm up to. It took me a while to learn, but I did fall in love with the system after I tried it because it is narrative based. It encourages improvisation. There are things called aspects. Aspects are important statements about your character, like I'm trying to think of an aspect that's interesting, and I'm drawing a blank now. Oh, I'll think of my character, who is an alchemist imbued by lightning. He gained his magic powers after being hit by lightning, and that's an open-ended thing, a statement about your character that makes your character unique. That's an aspect, and it's an aspect of my character, the alchemist. And you can then use that in play. There are rules for it where you use a fate point to activate your aspect, and it lets your aspect influence the action. It can influence dice rolls, or it can influence the action in a narrative way. So that mechanic encourages people to participate and to be creative. It engages the players more in guiding the action. You feel like you're not just playing your character, but you're playing in part of an improvisational troupe. The other thing I like about Fate is that it's based on a fail-forward concept. In some games, a simulationist-based game, you roll the dice, you fail, and nothing happens. Fate encourages that if you roll the dice and fail, that becomes part of the story. You can make it up so that the failed dice roll means you succeed, but with consequences or complications or side effects. And this plays very well. If you're skeptical, then I would say look for some videos of Fate actual play. There's a wonderful video that is on Will Wheaton's Tabletop. And that's what really committed me to giving Fate a good try. Now, when I encountered the Fate core system, it's a great game, but I found it hard to learn and to draw out the strengths of it from the way it's presented, because it's really written as a toolkit for experienced gamers to build their own games. And that's why I spent considerable energy reframing the Fate core rules in Magonomia, and you can see those in the starter rules.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to give an example of using the fate system with your imbued by lightning, because I've read the about a quarter of the way through the starter rules now. I've played the Marvel is it Marvel Heroic Roleplay, which has a Cortex based system, which is also narrative based. So I grasped it, but it's having run Marvel for people who had experience of nothing but likes of Dungeons and Dragons. For some people, it was hard to get their head around. So, let's say you've got a situation with your alchemist where, give me suggest a situation that you could conceivably have in a game of Magonomia with your alchemist. You've rolled your dice and you have succeeded. How would you actually go ahead? What would you? How would the scene? How would that sort of like look in a game session? Do you follow me?
Yeah, I follow you. So let's give me a task like I'm trying to cast a spell, because spells are usually resolved with dice. I want to introduce the random element into spell casting because you do so much of it when you're a wizard. And I like the opportunity for things to go a bit off plan. So that's why there are usually dice involved in casting a spell. And say that I'm now I'm trying to think of, okay, here's a simple example. I'm trying to cast a spell that will, I'm thinking of a particular spell called Elixir of Celerity, which is, you won't find it in the starter rules. You have to back the Kickstarter to get that spell. But Elixir of Celerity speeds you up and lets you take an additional action under certain conditions. So say I roll to cast Elixir of Celerity on myself and I fail, and say, well, I'm imbued by lightning, and that should have something to do, it should make me better at casting spells related to speed. And therefore, I'm going to invoke this aspect. I pay my fate point, and I can re-roll the dice. That's one way it could play out.
And if it fails again, I suppose you could say, well, actually, it happens, but perhaps you get hit by a bolt of lightning, for instance.
That could absolutely happen. Yes. So I could fail forward then. And even if I chose not to use my aspect and re-roll, I could fail forward. A more common example is, okay, I succeed in the potion. I drink it, but then that's my last dose of the potion that I have with me. So I've exhausted it, and now I can't cast it again until something in the story gets me back to my lab to brew another batch.
Okay.
That could be a cost. Spell.
Okay. Right. Every player. Sorry, go on.
I had another idea.
Go on.
Be more fun, right? Success at a cost, which is, okay, so I drink the Elixir of Celerity, and another cost that I could pay is, all right, it doesn't stop. When I'm done with my scene and my action, whatever I needed to be fast, I'm still stuck on fast forward mode for, say, the next scene afterward, and then I become exhausted. That could be another way to succeed at a cost.
Yeah, kind of like Blur from Transformers there.
Yeah.
Okay. Every player character in the game is a wizard of some description. You've got quite a few types in the book. I'm not going to spoil anything there. We spoke briefly about other role-playing games earlier, Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons, and a lot of role players are used to those games where wizards are quite squishy. And they're going to look at this and think, we're playing a party of wizards. Oh, we're going to get squashed. What do you say to those players to reassure them that that's not actually how it's going to work?
Well, I would say you will be squishy unless you invest some of your resources in being non-squishy. However, wizards, there's no rule in this game that prevents wizards from learning how to use a sword. There's nothing that prevents wizards from wearing armor. There's nothing that prevents wizards from casting spells to increase their own strength. and as I said, my celerity, my speed. And in fact, now certain kinds of wizards are more suited to melee combat than others. An astrologer probably is not going to be as strong in combat as a sorcerer. However, because everybody's a wizard, the game is designed that way. The game is designed so that you can play a wizard who's a bit of a fighter. You can even make a complete tank. I've seen it done.
Excellent. Okay. What the first thing that actually caught my eye when I was actually reading the starter rules was something. Well, obviously not the first thing, but the first thing that really stood out for me was this was even before I got into the content part, was something you called your platinum rule, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that just now, if that's okay.
Please.
So the platinum rule, it was on page 11 of the starter guide, states everyone, the GM and every player is responsible for making the game fun for everyone. If it looks like I'm looking off the screen, it's because I've got this written down off to the side. We call this the platinum rule. So everyone, the GM and every player is responsible for making the game fun for everyone. And I've read many role-playing rule books, and every single one of them emphasizes that gaming's for fun, but I don't think anything has been quite as explicit as that before. And I was actually quite impressed. So what was this mostly targeted at? What was the intended outcome there?
The intended outcome is to get over. It's really for the GM to see themselves as an entertainer. I went to see Tracy Hickman gave a presentation at Gen Con, Extreme Dungeon Mastery, XDM, and he wrote a book about being a great DM. And he convinced me that my approach to GMing had been wrong for the first 35 years of my gaming career, where I saw myself as creating challenges for players and creating obstacles and sort of setting, almost writing an exam or creating an obstacle course of problems for them to solve. And then they would either succeed or fail as players in my adventure. And what I came to believe instead is that as a game master, I'm there to make the game fun. I'm in the entertainment business, and primarily the entertainment business. And adhering to rules is all well and good if it contributes to a good experience, to a fun experience. And I want to be very clear that fun does require tension. It does require challenges. I talk about this a little bit in the rule book as well. So fun isn't everything is easy. Fun is that your character doesn't die of tetanus for no reason, or that accidents don't spoil your adventure.
Okay. Excellent. I particularly liked it because, from my perspective, there's a lot of. I was looking at it more of as from my perspective, I took it as a helpful socializing guide for sitting at the table, remembering that if the person sitting next to you is not having fun as well, then actually you're not 100% successful at the game if one person's not enjoying it. Everyone at the table needs to be getting their enjoyment out of it, and that's what I took away, that you were trying to actually overcome that, setting a good example. So I'm going to jump on to, you've mentioned the Kickstarter a couple of times. So when is Magonomia coming to Kickstarter?
July 26th, 2019.
Excellent. And how much is it going to be?
Well,
Do you know?
I do know. $25 for the PDF, $50 US for a hard copy. It will be a hardcover book, 275 pages or more, depending on stretch goals.
Okay, so
a full size player D&D player's handbook size book is the product.
okay, so presumably stretch goals. You just mentioned them there. If you get lots of people backing, you'll add more content to the book rather than exclusives.
That's correct. We have more content than will fit in the book. I have
Mhm.
spells and more enchanted creatures, and we certainly have more story ideas than we can fit in a book of really any size that we could afford to print and ship. So the more money we raise, the more content we'll put into the core book. Yes.
Okay, but as I say, no exclusive. So if you don't back it at the campaign, you'd still be able to get it later and not have lost anything.
That's true. There will be an exclusive in the sense that a rough edit of the rules, as soon as we've sized it to the word count that will fit in the funded book, that will be available in ugly plain text form with no illustrations and no nicely formatted tables, so that backers, can get started playing right away. That's when I say right away, I mean within a month or two after. I haven't exactly set the delivery deadline for that, but you'll be able to play it while the game is working through its production pipeline. Of course, there's an art project. Producing an RPG takes some time.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I suppose you'd also get the advantage of putting that out to backers. You'd be able to get feedback from them when they spot things that you didn't.
Exactly. The game has been play tested. It's been through 4 rounds of play testing. The mechanics are very solid, but the presentation always can be refined. This can be more clear, or I'd like to know a bit more about, for instance, what Hell Palace is like, or something like that. And absolutely, I want to engage with the backers and get that kind of feedback to inform the finished product, make it the best it can be. And that's another benefit of being a backer, is you get to be an insider there.
Excellent. Okay. I've come to the end of my questions there, I think. Oh, actually, one more.
Hmm?
What does the future hold for Magonomia? Let's assume everything goes to plan, everything's successful next month. Kickstarter is fully funded, ships within however long it takes. What happens next?
That's a great question. Adventures would be the next thing. We'll make some adventures and some support for the product line. I'm sure that there is room in the world for a complete adventure source book on Enchanted England, and perhaps some other countries as well. Scotland would be a wonderful place to have wizard adventures, and Ireland. Well, I think people would be disappointed if we didn't spend a lot of ink on Ireland.
Yes, I think you're right there.
So the first few supplements are sort of writing themselves. And I don't imagine that this, well, we'll see how it goes. It depends on what gamers need. I've been very successful so far during development, listening to people about what they want, and what kind of experience they're looking for. So we'll make products that will support that, and we'll see who's actually picking it up and drawn into it, and what the audience's interests are, and let that dictate the kinds of product support that we have. But I visualize adventures, and I visualize a couple of campaign source books probably, and then lots of spells, lots more spells. Yeah. I thought that, when you look at Renaissance magic, and I've got a grimoire on my shelf, I see a lot of repetition, repeated themes of what wizards, Renaissance magicians wanted to do. Turning invisible, finding buried treasure, love magic is a big theme, and a handful of others that just keep coming up. Just general knowledge, like learning all secrets or learning all knowledge, teaching all useful arts. So the spells in the sources read repetitively, and I thought that I would run out of ideas for spells. No, that is far from my problem. So I can see lots of spells in the future.
Brilliant. Okay, this has been. Thank you, Andrew. This has been fantastic. I hope folks watching have found this interesting. I hope I'll stick links in the description for anything related to Kickstarter. Magonomia, any links to web pages and blogs about it. There will also be an article that accompanies this interview, which will have some of my thoughts on having read through the starter rules. I'll be watching the Kickstarter, and at the very least, I think I'm going to be grabbing myself the PDF, but I'm a little bit of a snob, so I might well go for the hardback book as well. Thank you, Andrew. This has been great.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, you're welcome. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Bye for now.
Bye.